Hey guys, I'm Illpaws with ChampionSelect, bringing you a counter video on Jax, Grandmaster at Arms. The three champions I'll be discussing in this video are Malphite, Singed and Renekton. You can click on their face to skip ahead. Jax is one of the strongest late game champions in the game, becoming a tanky bruiser who can deal a lot of burst damage. Upon building items like Gunblade and Trinity Force, Jax will become a nightmare to deal with as he scales well with itemization. If he gains an early lead, Jax can easily carry his team to victory. Jax has a lot of strengths. First, let's discuss how he scales into the late game. Jax with 6 N tier items is difficult to deal with. He will now not only be putting out a lot of damage, but also the sustain and tankiness and crowd control to take on multiple enemies at once. His ultimate, Grandmaster's Might, offers him a huge increase in armor and magic resistance, which scales off his ability power and his attack damage. This makes him an incredible tank that can't be burst down in a team fight for 8 seconds. Also, if we apply context to this, Jax can jump onto key targets such as the enemy AD carry and burst them down whilst taking little to no damage back due to his counter strike. With the CC from Gunblade and Phage procs on top of his 8 seconds of tankiness, it's sometimes impossible to remove him off of your AD carry. Losing your AD carry in a team fight after the 40-minute mark usually results in GG, so don't let Jax get enough income to buy multiple big items. This moves us onto him having the only dodge ability left in the game. This means that he can easily devastate auto-attack reliant champions, not meaning just AD carriers but also champions such as Riven and Fiora. Counter-Strike gives Jax the ability to choose when he wants you to stop dealing damage to him, and against these AD champions it is almost as strong as a Kayle ultimate. Not to mention that upon either completion of the duration, or when he chooses so, he can stun all those around him. However, if we flip this around, it means that AP champions can deal with him very well, as Counter-Strike will have no purpose other than a stun and maybe the odd auto attack that you would have thrown at him. This is something you should be aware of as an AP mid player. Within those small skirmishes in the early game you can deal a lot of damage to Jax, whilst your AD carry cannot, so keep that in mind. Finally, he is really hard to deal with. The biggest counter to Jax is crowd control, as just holding him still will help your team out a lot. Exhaust is an amazing summoner spell to pick up against Jax, as it will cripple everything that he wants to do. Holding Jax off your AD carry, or simply silencing him into a stun so that he cannot activate Counter-Strike will work wonders. The biggest item counter to Jax is Frozen Heart. Even though he deals both physical and magical damage, he is very reliant on attack speed. Attack speed gives him his extra burst damage every third attack, alongside increasing the stacks of his passive, which also gives him attack speed. Randuin's Omen will also work very well for similar reasons, but having Frozen Heart will slow down Jax wherever he is in the team fight. The biggest counter to Jax is Malphite. In the lane phase, if you make sure not to run out of mana by spamming your abilities, you should have a smooth, relatively easy game. You are innately tanky, and will most likely buy more tank items as the game progresses. Opting for gold generating items such as Heart of Gold is great, as Omen will be extremely useful late game if you sync it with your ultimate. Jax will look for opportunities to leap strike onto you and hit you with a couple of auto attacks and empower to try and bully you out of the lane. When you see him attempt this, use your ground slam ability to slow his attack speed and then return some damage back to him with your other abilities. If he is dealing too much damage in these trades for you to cope, you can use ground slam followed up by seismic shard and just walk away from the fight. In the late game team fights, Jax should either be focusing down your AD carry or your AP carry, and if the opportunity is there, you can use your unstoppable force onto the target Jax's leap strike to deny him the initiation. However, you might find that's more beneficial for your team if you were to ultimate onto different targets. This is your call, but if you want to make sure that your fed AD carry stays alive, or it's late game and he's dealing the most damage on your team, protecting him might be a good idea. For itemization on Malphite, I'd recommend picking up both high armor items and high magic resistance items. Frozen Heart is a must due to the attack speed debuff, and Omen is also a good idea if you use it after landing your ultimate. For the magic resistance item, Abyssal Scepter is a great choice if you have a lot of AoE lockdown on your team, but this is down to your decision. The next counter is Singed, and before I go into this, I must state that Singed can lose this lane, really easily. If you are not a good Singed player, this is probably not for you, but a good Singed will laugh in Jax's face as he kites him all day. In general, Singed doesn't need to auto attack, as most of his damage comes from his poison trail, meaning that Counter-Strike isn't very effective. His skill set also offers the ability to kite Jax around with Mega Adhesive, alongside being able to flip Jax off of him. Ideally, you will not fight Jax in the lane until around level 4 onwards, as he can easily push you back to base in the early trades. In team fights, Singed most likely will not be anywhere near Jax, as he will be too busy running around like a madman around the enemy team, poisoning them. However, you can choose to stay around your most valuable teammates and defend them from Jax. Flip Jax away if he leap strikes, and use your adhesive to create a gap between him and his chosen target. When itemizing Singed, you should still pick up the usual Singed core items, like Rylai's, however keep in mind Frozen Heart works wonders on you and will destroy Jax. An early Glacial Shroud in the lane phase will be very useful and helps up Jax gaining lane control. Finally, Renekton. Renekton is similar to Singed in that this lane can be lost if you don't play it well. Essentially, as it always is with Renekton, you have to win the very early game and snowball hard. Luckily for you, Renekton should be able to win most trades against Jax in the early game. Counter-Strike will be your worst enemy, and if Jax starts with this as his first skill, he might shut you down, which in turn will allow him to snowball. This is bad as he will scale a lot better than you into the late game, so the best way to combat this is to see what skill he chooses first, and then use that knowledge to skill yourself. Take Call the Meek if he is going for Counter-Strike, otherwise just go with your normal ability path. Look to harass Jax often, especially if he ever uses a Counter-Strike, as this is when he's at his weakest. Another tip is to not allow Jax to stack up his attack speed passive by initiating the trades on your own terms. Go in with your slice and dice, use your abilities and dice out before he gets time to react. Often you can burn his mana pool by simply slicing him followed by an instant dicing away, as he might activate Counter-Strike in a moment of panic. As Renekton, you can easily navigate your way around teamfights, and in some situations you may never come in contact with Jax. But if you do see him destroying your strongest teammate, then an empowered Ruthless Predator auto attack will help keep him at bay. Otherwise, there is little that you can do to stop him. For Renekton's itemization, you can't afford to optimize for defensive items, or else you'll just shut yourself down and lose the early game advantage. The only defensive item you should go out of your way to build is Guardian's Angel, and even then, get this after a few offensive items, or else you'll have no use for your team. If you want to look at a written condensed version of this video, feel free to go check the blog on ChampionSelect.net, there'll be a link in the description. Until next time, take care.